Hello and welcome to the pretty confusing Lynchian nightmare of Twin Peaks. But you know what isn't confusing about this show that I legitimately had not seen before I watched it for this specific video? The trans representation. Something which might come as a surprise for the cis people who clicked on this to see how exactly this TV series from the 90s failed trans people, like all those other darn shows that I seem to keep covering. No, in a surprise to absolutely nobody who knows David Lynch's work and his career/engagement with his work, Twin Peaks actually has a pretty encompassing and compassionate view of its single trans character, Denise Bryson. I mean, shit, we can just play the clip from the 2017 revival.
And when you became Denise, I told all your colleagues, those clown comics, to fix their hearts or die.
Now, do we even need to make a video after a statement that hardcore and so defining that I think every trans protest or pride parade has had it since? Yeah, we do need to talk through a few things, because even the greatest and best representation has its flaws. And even the greatest representation is redundant if people don't understand why it's good. And I've heard from enough trans people the ways in which cis people don't really get Denise, or misconstrue common issues with trans characters into being an overall judgment on the Twin Peaks series. And so hopefully with this video you can finally either send it to them or confront them yourselves with the information to show them not to chuck the David Lynch baby out with the a little screw up here and there bathwater. Oh, the other main reason for making this video is because I promised a long time ago that the 5 Twin Peaks fans in my audience would get a video, and since then I've had a comment once a day telling me to make the video, so here you go. You can have the video now. You can stop asking me. I'm doing it for you, alright? So, who is Denise Bryson? Why is she good representation? Are there issues with her characterization? And what can we take into the future from it? That's what we're going to try and answer in this video. First up, then, is who is Denise Bryson? Denise Bryson exists predominantly towards the mid-end of the first show, appearing in the episodes 18 through to 20 of Season 2, before reappearing in Part 4 of the second Twin Peaks show. It's kind of awkward when you have these revivals that use the same name and are technically a continuation season-wise, but have a massive 20-year time gap, and you're stuck also discussing individual seasons within them too. That's neither here nor there when it comes to Denise. Thankfully we can discuss who Denise is without having to discuss the major intricacies and details of the overarching Twin Peaks plot, because I don't think that I'm smart enough or I've taken enough drugs to be able to successfully pull that one off. Something about a dude called Bob, or B.O.B., who harvests some weird-ass corn cream-looking stuff called Garmonbosia, which is the pain and suffering of people, and lives in a lodge somewhere that exists outside of our time and space, and there's also doppelgangers of people there, I think, and there's angels, I'm pretty sure, too, of the dead teenager who was killed by the guy that was being possessed by B.O.B, because B.O.B can possess people and then make them do stuff, evil things to make that cream corn. There's also a bunch of other little storylines sort of scattered throughout and stuff. I think it's representative of a demon, or humanity's evil, or like many of David Lynch's stuff, maybe it's just some Lynchian weird shit that he doesn't take the time to explain in interviews because he wants people to assign meaning to it that maybe he didn't put in himself. It's a very Lynch thing to do. Denise first appears to us in her main role throughout the series, that of DEA agent who is investigating the main character Cooper over his drug allegations, while in reality she's actually on his side and trying to find out how Cooper was framed and who was behind it all. Cooper is Dale Cooper, the main character, who is really cool.
Surefire cure for a hangover, Harry. You take a glass of nearly frozen, unstrained tomato juice, you plop a couple of oysters in there, you drink it down. Breathe deeply. Next, you take a mound, and I mean a mound of sweetbreads. Saute them with some chestnuts and some Canadian bacon. Finally, biscuits. Big biscuits, smothered in gravy. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You're gonna need some anchovies. Excuse me. That should do it.
And in that first episode, she also explains her story to Cooper of how she discovered her identity as a woman through an undercover operation in Tijuana that involved dressing up as a transvestite to get close to a drug dealer who only dealt to transvestites. The explanation of this identity and how it came to be is well received, and not given a comedic light or anything that would suggest it is less than a serious or appropriate development for somebody to go through.
My partner thought it was my consummate professionalism. It was a very confusing 2 weeks. Well, this is all a pretty amazing disclosure, Denise. Imagine how surprised I was, Coop. It's not exactly something you plan on. It's not.
She aids Cooper throughout the next few episodes in working out this drug-related storyline, including dressing in drag during episode 20 for a sting operation that unfortunately backfires and leads to Cooper offering himself to Jean Renault and Canadian Mounted Police Officer Preston King, who are the ones that are doing the drug operation. They're the bad guys for this little arc kind of era. And when I say drag, what I mean is that Denise dresses up as Dennis and goes as male to attempt to infiltrate them. It's like a reverse of her own story sort of thing, where it's like she discovered her identity by doing drag in the first place, which turned out to not be drag, and now to do this she's also going undercover again in drag now. So, interesting parallel there to put in, I think, from David Lynch. It's, there's a fascinating element to that.
Where's Denise?
Haven't seen her.
You can call me Dennis. Oh, I don't know, somehow it seemed more appropriate.
Denise, however, comes back into scene when she appears to help rescue Cooper, dressed in a waitress outfit and hiding an additional gun beneath her skirt, strapped to her leg, nothing like what you might be thinking from that statement, although it did remind me of those conservative memes that are like, the only bulge I want to find in my woman's pants is a gun, because, why not both, right? And they proceed to collectively kill/subdue the villains of this drug deal arc. And with that, Denise bounces out of the TV show, having served her purpose of investigating and clearing Cooper of the drug charges. She comes in and out like a sweet breeze of the show's weird-ass stuff, and then I had to watch the rest of it and finish it up because, I'd already committed by that point. Oh, and she bounces out of the old Twin Peaks show. She does come back in for the new Twin Peaks show, appearing in part 4 as we mentioned, as we discover that she has risen to the FBI Chief of Staff, #girlboss, am I right? And she is told by Gordon Cole, played by David Lynch, an old agent, that they have found Cooper in a random-ass prison 25 years after he vanished. Although, by vanished, what they mean, and that we know that they don't, was that he was replaced by his doppelganger from the Black Lodge and was stuck in the weird alternative space-time that the Black Lodge occupies, so who the fuck knows what was really going on there. And she approves an operation to investigate this reappearance, though only after Cole reminds her of all the support that he has given her throughout her career. From the loose cannon nature of the early time, through to when she transitioned and the way that her colleagues reacted to that, including that banger line that we might as well just throw that in again, right? Yeah, let's watch David Lynch say those words again. I like it.
And when you became Denise, I told all your colleagues, those clown comics, to fix their hearts or die.
Well, she is doing. And now she has broken a lot of, what's the ceiling called for trans women? The glass ceiling is obviously for all women experiencing the patriarchal club/networking/perception issue that effectively makes it very hard to move up corporate ladders, so they don't have the relationships to be able to do so with upper management, or the ability to engage in behaviours that would encourage mobility, such as demanding the promotion or demanding a pay rise, as to do so is seen in a negative light, as like whining, compared to the positive light that men get seen in, i.e. go-getter. I guess it's just the glass ceiling as well, but I thought maybe there would be like a specific terminology for it. I'm getting sidetracked. Whatever ceiling it was, we can see that Denise Bryson has broken it. And I'm not getting into the specifics of whether the FBI or the DEA are good government organisations, because honestly that isn't relevant to the conversation here. We are focusing on the position of a trans woman within the narrative of a show about governmental agents. ACAB aside is kinda how we have to approach this. You know, I am aware of that situation, you don't need to comment about it. With the Who answered now, hopefully, or at least I've gone over all the times that Denise appeared and what we get told about her character, so I can't really do much more than that. We now move to the question of whether the representation is good or bad. And as I often end up doing during these, the answer has to be a somewhat nuanced one, because there are always positive and negative elements and contexts at play. Even the worst representation can have some redeeming qualities, and more relevant to the Denise discussion, even the best representation can have some dragging flaws. So let's start with the good parts, because it is useful to have those in mind before you move to the downer stuff. It allows for a more comprehensive consideration, because bad stuff normally sticks far more easily and turns us off completely from accepting good stuff when we hear it first. So, starting in the past, the distant past of the 1990s, when trans people representation was a little bit hazy and generally really crap unless you got lucky, and which we've covered pretty in some depth so far in regards to shows like Friends, and that I'm sure we will cover even further into the future. Our first introduction to Denise Bryson in episode 18 establishes a theme of surprise from Cooper and the people at the Sheriff's Department because they were expecting a man. There is an air of tension and uncertainty, and a little bit of transphobia from the one detective who refuses to shake her hand upon this discovery. But the way that she generally holds herself in this scene, and the reaction from Dale Cooper himself, gives us an impression not that we are meant to be laughing at or disgusted by Denise, that this is a big deal and that there is clearly a story here, but that this is a confident and capable person who knows what they like, a piece of Sheriff Truman if you know what I'm saying.
Well, we'll catch up later. I want to tell you all about my new life.
Anxious to hear about it.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Sheriff.
And who Dale Cooper is a friend of. What we get here as well is this insight into cis men's responses that I think are appropriate to that aforementioned uncertainty. There is some situations of misgendering, of underhanded comments that reflect the shock that they feel upon dealing with this, but none of it is immediately hostile, is immediately opposed to Denise's existence, and Cooper himself, like I said, is very much pleased to see their old friend and adjust to this new circumstance. The officer who refused to shake Denise's hand even makes a comment about how the colour that he's wearing looks good on him, which, yes, misgendering, but they're trying to be kind or trying to be nice with it. So, like I said, it's not saying that they're getting it right or that they necessarily accept the transness, but they don't immediately jump to hostility, is what we're getting here. That theme continues throughout the episodes featuring Denise, including when she is talking to Cooper at the wedding reception scene. Cooper accidentally, during the conversation, dead names Denise, and she quickly corrects him, to which he apologizes.
And my guess is it will match the lot stolen from the Mountie.
Dennis, this can't appear straight to you.
Denise.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, sure, it looks like a frame, Coop.
Now, that as an interaction is not going to seem like a big deal to us fancy modern folk, but to have that occur during a show in the 90s, when its contemporaries were confusing drag and transgender identity and openly dead-naming with no pushback at all, this small part is actually a big deal. It showcases exactly what you would want to happen in that situation between friends. Dale Cooper has known Denise for a long time and has ingrained a particular name, but that isn't used as an excuse. It's merely just a quick apology and then moving on. This is incredible, and it's mostly incredible because of how bad things were at that time for trans characters on screen. I mean, we've mentioned how we got Charles Bing from Friends, which I've talked about, and Boys Don't Cry, which I will presumably have to talk about at some point because I think everybody does who's trans or talking about trans stuff. Our protagonists just accepting this information and moving on with it tells the audience some good lessons for dealing with trans people that they know, or that they might meet, that shows the respect and basic humanity that was not till this point been so well established in regards to how an audience should perceive a trans person. Throughout the other scenes involving Denise in this initial 90s version of Twin Peaks, the image that we get of her is that one that I confirmed earlier, the image of a good agent who is qualified at their job and who doesn't let their gender identity get in the way of that, whose forwardness also serves to mostly see people respond to her in respect to that gender identity, such as Ethan Niles and Audrey Horne, with Ethan being shocked to find out that Denise was going to dress as a man to facilitate the sting operation, not, I guess, realizing that they were a trans woman and that, they had transitioned and didn't know how to do that kind of, dressing up as a man sort of thing. They had experience, I guess, that's what you could argue.
You do now? A major drug trafficker will arrive from Seattle tomorrow. You will set up a meet with these men at the Dead Dog Farm.
I will. How will I know him?
You're looking at him.
Him?
And Audrey being impressed to find out that the DEA hires female agents. What we see from these scenes as well is something that I want to cover here, because I do not think it's necessarily a good or bad element of Denise, and that is the way that she sees herself. While it is definitively clear that she is a woman, or that she identifies as such, she also seems to be in that area of accepting some maleness as part of transitioning, referring to herself as more or less a female DEA agent, and not expressing too much intense dysphoria at the idea of dressing up as a man and going by Dennis in the interest of her job. This is something that I want to bring up more when we talk about the creation of the character, which is something that is a flaw that I will, like I said, get into. But this is also in the awkward space of time and also of different perspectives, because there are trans women who would undeniably see themselves in this more complex and not so comprehensively discussed light. What I'm trying to say is that queer commentary and queer theory has come a long way in the past 30 years, and the way that Denise is acted would not be completely impossible to see as reflected within the trans community of that time, within the experience of those who question and are coming out when she was first on screen. It's not perfect or good according to our understanding of queer theory and of transgender identity, but as of that time, when there wasn't a lot of thought or information about it, it could be seen as being true to that. Another more minor aspect that I think of as interestingly positive is the way that she engages with Dale Cooper after meeting Audrey Horne and seeing them together, commenting on it and leading Dale to ask if she is even interested in women anymore. To which she says this.
Now can we talk about something more important? Exactly how old is that girl?
Denise, I would assume you're no longer interested in girls.
Coop, I may be wearing a dress, but I still pull my panties on one leg at a time, if you know what I mean.
Not really.
Now, I'm kind of with Cooper here. I don't know what that means directly, but I understand that from her portrayal that Denise Bryson is both interested in men and women, and that her transness has not defined her sexuality. That coming out is not used as part of this narrative about her being comfortable being into men, as she is still queerly into women as well. That is good and interesting as representation goes, because oftentimes trans women are portrayed as transitioning partly because it helps them be into men more easily, something which you might recognise as being an element of Ray Blanchard's arguments of either women being AGP, i.e. also genophiles, or into their own selves when they are transitioning, or into men and not being comfortable being labelled as gay. A bunch of theories that are complete bullshit from a complete bullshit man, but that were heavily entrenched in media like this from cis people. So Denise breaking that is good. Our other positive, the one positive I want to talk about from the later Twin Peaks, is the one that is far closer to our time. It's one that continues these themes that have been brought up. That idea that Denise is powerful representation because she is qualified. She's in a stereotypically masculine job as a woman, and the characters we like don't engage in disrespecting her or who she is. Her transness is never used as a weapon against her. Is never used to justify storylines that would be traumatic or close to queer antipathy. References are made to her womanhood, rather than her transness in a conversation with Gordon, over whether he should take Tammy on the operation.
Agent Tammy Preston has the stuff, Denise.
I know. I'm speaking more as a woman now than as the chief of staff of the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation. Yeah, normally I can't think like this. I have to forego all that and grow balls of steel to do this job. And it's a bitch, let me tell you sometimes. Not to mention the screaming hormones. Oh, I know, I'm sorry, Gordon. I know.
A wink to the audience of acceptance, and also key to writing Denise as a woman first and trans second, compared to how a lot of shows will write their trans characters the other way round. Denise is not a villain. She's not a victim. She is a successful career woman who is able to do her job to such a degree that she rises in the ranks, who is able to be who she is without any real serious issue, and who isn't treated as comedy or treated as disgust by the show. Those are all the good key hallmarks that we should look for with trans representation. But that's our positive out of the way. And our negatives here are, as mentioned, not going to be about the dead naming or the reactions of certain characters or the misgendering, because the contextual framing of the show and the way in which it points us as an audience does not necessarily make all that out to be good or to be something that we should do or that is okay for us to engage in. It's part of a grander narrative that is not negative to the representation. No, there is only one major real issue that I have with Denise Bryson as a character, and it's one that needs to be addressed so that we can understand it as a problem and seek to improve on it into the future by taking lessons from the past. See, yes, the role of Denise is played by David Duchovny, a cis man who is dressing up as a woman to play that role. Now, when people try to defend this, the normal stuff is that actors have consistently played women all the way back to Shakespeare and old theatre, and actors are already pretending to be something, so why can't a cis male actor pretend to be a trans woman? And here is the thing. Nothing is saying that they can't. Nothing is saying that they can't do that and that they can't do it well. I think that David's performance as Denise is pretty well done, and manages to appeal to a lot of nuance in the character and portraying it in a way that is far from treating it as a joke. Even if I do have some issues with certain mannerisms that are employed by David Duchovny in the role. But, and this is a Sir Mix-a-Lot sized but, the problem I have is not with the essence of Duchovny's acting, nor his ability to do so. It is in fact linked to that core idea of having a cis man play a trans woman, which ripples out into various issues which cause harm and are not ideal for trans representation or the trans community in relation to our media, that we need to cover so people can't so easily just hand-wave this away as a problem like I described before. The first ripple effect is the effect that it has on trans women in the acting business. because many of them struggle to find work or gainful employment due to the classic issues of subtle bigotry and subconscious favoritism that have created difficulties for a variety of minorities trying to get anywhere in any career path. Thanks to perspectives on minorities that are reinforced through media that paint them in negative lights for the people whose job is to decide whether they should get hired and be able to dispel those illusions in the first place, a cycle that just creates suffering because nothing is changing there, or the cis-straight boys club that exists and gives legs up to all the people who are fortunate enough to be in them, many talented and capable trans actors and actresses are unable to get any gigs, made even harder by the fact that when it comes to gigs that should seem written for them, they're stuck behind others in consideration by those same factors. Jen Richards, a pretty well-known trans actress, actually has talked about this in interviews, and is one of the reasons why she ended up creating her own web series called Her Story, which is pretty good, and you can go check it out by, looking it up, and you should probably do that. But making it herself and casting it herself let her be involved in getting trans people into trans roles in that. Laverne Cox, probably the most famous trans actress anybody knows, has discussed similar things in multiple interviews, going over the hardship with convincing people and casting directors and writers that trans people are marketable and that audiences will be able to accept them featuring in TV shows or films. So there is that problem with a cis man playing a trans woman, that he is in effect taking away opportunities from those who could just as easily play that role and could be as talented, if not more capable, to playing the role in the first place. Which leads into our second issue, and that is how I mentioned beforehand there being some mannerisms and ways that Denise acts that personally I found to be somewhat disconnecting from her identity as a trans woman. This is a subjective element that I'm criticizing here, but I hope that it reflects with something that you might also feel, or that might reflect into other trans roles that you see played by cis people, like Eddie Redmayne. It felt more like what would happen if a cis man wrote her and a cis man acted her, and while Denise might be the best we could get considering those circumstances, it does emphasize that element of if a trans person was playing Denise, then she can bring that authentic experience and portrayal that helps solidify that and get away from any implicit misunderstandings that might happen without a trans woman's involvement in a trans female character. This falls back into that acting thing again. We're in accepting that actors can play any role. What we find is that many actors do research for their roles, or method act the character that they're going to play, so that they can get into the headspace of that role, and give it the presentation that it needs to feel real to the audience. Having actual people with that experience who are actors already built into who they are, especially with identities that are harder to easily get lived time in. Tom Cruise can go and be a delivery person for 6 months to find out how to think like one. Little trickier for him to live like a trans woman for 6 months so that he can act like one. Or at least, fuck no, that's a bad idea. And also wouldn't even give you the whole story or idea on it if that's how you're going into it. Having a trans woman play a trans woman circumvents this issue entirely, as they know what it's like to be a trans woman. They know how this character, at least in some elements, thinks or feels about stuff because they have a closer connection to that character that could be helpful for giving some insight into their reactions and actions. So we've covered the financial/career issue, we've covered the writing issue. Both of those are centered around the role itself, around the job side of the problem, while our final issue takes it over to the other side and talks about why having a cis man play a trans woman is a bad thing for the audience. It's a bad thing because it plays into one of the common tropes and expectations for many cis audiences back in that time period. An issue that has continued and been influenced, no doubt, by portrayals like this, wherein it confirms that idea that a trans woman is just a man in a dress. That it is barely indistinguishable from a very dedicated drag queen. a confusing idea and mixed identity issue that we can see reflected in that Charles Bing representation from the Friends video. Seriously, go check out that video. I cannot mention it enough because, I want you to go see my other stuff. Go on. After this one, obviously, go on, hop to. Watch my other videos. Go get them. When an audience sees a man playing a trans woman, they accept that such a thing is accurate to the situation. It implicitly engages with and nurtures that perception, especially when many people rely on these TV and film portrayals to get their connection to trans people and trans identities. They know that it's a man playing a woman, and it doesn't seem bad or wrong or odd for that to be the case, because to them there is no real difference in that. Things for the modern sense have got better on this front. More and more studios and production companies are realizing the financial, social, and stylistic effects that come along with having cis people play the role of trans characters. But it still wasn't so long ago that we had Jeffrey Tambor playing an elder trans woman in Transparent. And I know that there might be the question here of, well, should we have cis women playing trans women? Like in Friends, or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Is that a better choice? Is that what you'd want? And sure, that fixes one aspect of the problem. It doesn't affirm to the audience that trans women are men, or can be assigned to men with no perceptive difficulty. It instead assures their place within the feminine role, but doesn't resolve the other facets, so no. I think that while one is slightly better than the other, both kind of suck, and it's just better to have trans people play trans people. The actresses and actors are out there. You don't have to look that far for them because they'd love to get a job. It's just casting directors need to just get better at it. Now, for our final tiny little bit before I do the conclusion and wrap this up, I want to slightly touch upon David Lynch's role in all of this. Because there is undeniably some part of who he is that interacts with the way that Denise is written. And I want to acknowledge here that from what I have gathered from reading interviews, I don't know David Lynch personally, that he seems like a very, very strange man who can be incredibly kind and warm towards people, but also distant and a nightmare, to all of the many wives that he cheated on and became shut off due to his focus on his work. But in relation to Denise specifically, this idea of kindness ties more into the way that he seems to be accepting of the outsider in consideration of his work. That while the idea of Lynchian defines the way that he will create bizarre and confusing elements of horror and grossness, those outsiders in his works are never portrayed as horrifying or gross themselves. Instead, they are often given a dignity and an essence of humanity that is then contrasted with the cruelty or internal wrongness of those who appear normal on the surface and will mock those outsiders. He's also dedicated to this idea of freedom and the ability to control who you are and yourself, which I think might have some involvement in that process. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the intricacies of David Lynch, mostly because in the dozens of interviews that I trawled through, he just came across as an odd fellow who would say a variety of things that almost seemed designed, like his creative works, to make you spend more time trying to figure out what was meant by them than he spent deciding what they meant to him. He never really shares the secrets of why anything is anything from the director or creative experience, so much of it is up to us to see what he said and how a trans person was used within his work. I think that truly the comments by the character he played in Twin Peaks is probably the closest we're going to get to understanding his particular perspective on the trans community. So play it again. Yes, I'm literally finding excuses to keep shoving this into the video at this point because I just really like listening to it.
And when you became Denise, I told all your colleagues, those clown comics, to fix their hearts or die.
So that's everything about Twin Peaks. Or at least everything I wanted to talk about, and now comes the hard part of answering that big question that hovers over all of this. Was it good or bad trans representation? Obviously, like all of these videos, it's a mixed bag, but I definitely think that Denise Bryson, for how she has written into the story as a light-hearted and emotive character, who we as the audience are supposed to take seriously, and who succeeds in that world, is a positive message about transness. It does lag a little bit by the act of having a cis man playing her, but that doesn't hurt the overall tone or idea that the cis viewer will take away, or the trans viewer will be able to reflect on / connect with. It's a quality show with good representation, even if I still don't really understand what the fuck was going on in the major overarching plot. I would definitely put Denise up there with Carmen from It's Always Sunny, which yet again you can find me talking about in my video on it on this channel. That's right, I'm plugging myself again. The video, it's all in there, you know? I mean, there's no sponsor, so I gotta be the sponsor for this video, because nobody else is stepping up, so I'm gonna plug myself. And that's that. It's good representation. She's, like I said beforehand, not a villain, not a character meant to mock or laugh at, not a character who we're meant to see as a victim. They're a character who exists, who is able, who is strong and independent, and is someone who we can see as likable, who engages the main character in a way that we can comfortably be okay with, and that's good representation. If you liked this journey and enjoyed what was done here, whether you agree or not, then please consider giving it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. Or you could, I don't know, get me in touch with David Lynch. I'd like to ask him personally what his opinions of the trans community are, because nobody's asking him that in interviews. No one asks about Denise Bryson. Please, someone in an interview ask him about Denise Bryson. Oh, if you know David Lynch, can you, my DMs are open. Tell him to, just, hop in there, and, we can have a chat. And I can, I don't know, put in, an addendum comment and say, this is what David Lynch actually said about this. If you really like what I have done, and on the note of that sponsor thing, you can go to my Patreon or Ko-Fi page and join this list of people who are the actual sponsors for all of my videos, whose immense kindness and generosity keeps letting me have the time and capability to go researching and writing and creating these videos. It means the world to me to have that opportunity, and so endless gratitude is all that I can really offer in return. Well, that and making videos at a rate that reflects my obsessive need to create and release stuff. Other than all of that, thank you for watching this video. And I was going to do a Twin Peaks style outro where my doppelganger would turn up and I'd wrestle them before they threw me into the Black Lodge and took over the channel. But I don't know how to do that, and I'm not making enough money to hire an editor or to do a green screen thing, I guess. Sorry, I know lots of other channels do all kind of funky skits and funny bits, but from me you mostly just get a person talking in front of a camera with an unchanging background behind them. It's lazy, but at least you know what you're going to get each episode, right? And it doesn't distract from the message of the video essay that I'm writing, is how I get to sleep at night without worrying about it. Have a good day.